So 17 years ago, I had a real job working in corporate America, not as the current writer, educator, podcaster thing that I am now. And one particular winter day, I remember driving to work after a snowstorm and being incredibly stressed out. And so even though I'm gripping the steering wheel with all this unnecessary force, my stress actually didn't have much to do with driving in the snow. That didn't bother me that much. But truth is that this snow was likely to make me late to work. And so, you would think it snowed and traffic was bad, and that's a reasonable excuse for your boss that you were late to work. Like, you would think that's pretty reasonable, right? But my boss wasn't exactly as reasonable as you and I. And driving to work that day, I was painfully aware of her 3-strike rule. And so if any of her employees were late, even by 1 minute, no joke, 3 times a year, you'd be fired. Okay? So she didn't believe in excuses. She believed in personal responsibility, and I do too. We share that belief in the importance of personal responsibility, but she was incredibly legalistic and extreme and had these very extreme consequences, and it made me crave a freedom with my life that I did not have. And the fact is, I felt like my boss owned me. I felt trapped. I felt controlled. And this particular morning when I was driving to work, I knew that if I was late, this was going to be my 2nd strike. And as much as I hated that job, I desperately needed it because I was living paycheck to paycheck, and getting fired and having to look for another job just wasn't a good option. It would mean I'd probably miss my rent payment, my car payment, my credit card payments, and on and on and on. And if it happened to take me a couple months to find a job because I had no emergency savings, I'd be late on all these payments, the bill collectors would be calling, and it would just be a huge mess. And so all of this is piled up on my shoulders, and this is why I'm so stressed out as I'm driving to work this day. And I remember every time that I'd walk in late while working for that boss, the shame that I felt for failing. And I felt like I let her down. I felt like I was letting myself down, letting the world around me down. And then even some of the days when I wasn't late, but where I just barely made it in time, like all the stress and the baggage, and it's just like, oh. And I can still picture that cubicle with vivid detail and the discouragement on my face as I sat down at that desk those mornings. And I dreamed of a day where she didn't own me anymore, and where I was in a financial position where I could just tell her, respectfully, that her 3-strike rule was kind of insane and that I didn't need her. Now, fast forward about 10 years, a friend of mine named Matt, he's a fellow internet entrepreneur like me. He ran a website similar to ours, but in the health niche. And he'd been running his website and making a nice full-time living for a few years. But he was a people person, and he really missed personal interaction. And you just don't get that when you're sitting on the couch with a computer all day. And so he decided to go out and get a part-time job at the bread company location that was just up the street from him. So it didn't pay much, but he didn't really care because he wasn't doing it for the money. He wasn't making every work decision about the money, which blew my mind. That alone was a level of freedom that I'd never thought possible. But a couple months later, it really hit home for me. So a few months into his job at bread company, Matt had followed the proper procedures for requesting time off for travel that he needed, well in advance. So his boss calls him in and says, "Hey, sorry, we're going to have to deny your vacation request and you have to come to work." And Matt explained that he had followed all the procedures and that everything was already booked and really couldn't be moved. To which his boss replied, "Sorry, but you're going to have to cancel your plans and you have to come into work." And I can imagine having requested time off to travel out of state to my sister's wedding and having my boss tell me that I can't go, and being faced with that really difficult decision. But for Matt, this was easy because he just told his boss, "No thanks, I quit." I wish I could have seen his boss's face. I think it would be really fun to be a fly on the wall in that conversation. It probably wasn't every day that boss encountered an employee who didn't so desperately need them that they couldn't be owned, and that completely turns the power dynamics of the boss-employee relationship a little bit. And this kind of freedom has always been one of my primary motivations for improving my financial life. And not just because I want to be a rebel and never submit to anyone or yield to authority, but mostly because I just want one master in my life, to be Jesus. And sure, like we talk about a lot, I want to be able to give more and impact the world around me, but being free to not be owned by a dictator boss has always been really high up on my list. And being able to go and do whatever God is asking me to do without having to check with my bank account is pretty amazing as well. So hopefully you have a great boss or have had great bosses and never dealt with anything like this. And hopefully you have this level of freedom now. But if you don't, I'd love to help you move more in that direction. Now, it won't happen overnight, but even just taking a few small steps this year can make a world of difference. So I just want to take a minute real quick and just share how I can help you with this. So number one, get on our email list if you're not already. Just seedtime.com/subscribe. You can get on right there. We share all of our best tips and strategies and ideas and encouragement with our email subscribers. That's our most tight-knit family, so you definitely want to be on that list. Number two, you should enroll in our 6-week live class called True Financial Freedom. And so this is part training, part workshop, part Bible study. It's a whole bunch of stuff all rolled up into one. And it's going to leave you with specific strategies and step-by-step tactics to begin designing a life of true freedom. And number three, you should consider taking my passive investing course called 10X Investing, where you can basically look over my shoulders. I show you literally down to the buttons to press how to begin investing using time-tested and proven strategies. And this is going to help you take what you have and multiply it so that it can continue to grow and so you can move towards this life of financial freedom. All right, so now I want to talk about the most important thing here. If this is a desire of your heart, you need to bring it to God. So while I can show you some of the practical steps, having God in this equation is the most important part. So you need to bring your financial goals, whatever they are, to God and ask for his help. And I believe that when our heart is right and when our motivations are pure, God actually gets a kick out of helping us reach our goals. So that has to be the first step in all this. So that's my encouragement for you today. Let's make 2022 an awesome financial year where we're all moving forward financially and impacting the world around us.